And I threw one experimental stone, and I realised that the forward motion could topple me over the high flats. It was quite terrifying. And then I realised that if the police, by some chance, managed to capture the high flats, there was only one entrance, only one way up to the roof, and only one way out if they got onto that roof. I do remember thinking, God, they'd toss us over, they'd be that savage. So I got down off the roof very quickly.
Somebody tries to throw that, the top will come out and the petrol will go all over his back. That's why we've had people turned down there. So get the cork in very, very tight, as tight as you can.
Certainly it was the first time that I had been attacked from above. It was a very dangerous situation when you can't see anything, at least from the front. You can see it coming, but from above, you just cannot see these things coming.
It was like shooting fish in a barrel. All the young people were up on top of the high flats, the police were underneath. You just threw stones and petrol bulbs down at them.
At the same time, of course, we were being stoned heavily from the front, and the petrol bombs and missiles were coming down from the top of the Roosevelt Street flats. And then I was struck on my left shoulder by a petrol bomb, which enveloped me completely in flames. Things were somewhat a little hazy after that, but the first thing I remember was the intense pain on my shoulder and the pain in my chest. I couldn't see, no matter where I turned, was flames all around me. I couldn't see where I was going, and as I ran into the rioters, someone hit me with something very hard, possibly an iron bar, down the side of the head, which smashed my helmet and put me out of action. Then I was taken from there to Altangavin Hospital, where I was treated for my injuries, and was ill for some 9 months after that.
It was not just petrol bombs and other missiles that were being used to carry the fight by the Bogsiders. As the battle progressed, they tuned into the crackling signal of Radio Free Derry, the pirate voice of the rioters.
Here BB, please play a request for William Brown from Helen.
This is Radio Free Derry, broadcasting on 200 meters medium waveband.
The request is for Dewey Woody and John McCourt from Bridget and Kathleen.
There wasn't an obvious leadership in the actual orchestration of the defence of the Bogside. There certainly were people who certainly had leadership qualities, and among them, I certainly would have put Bernadette Devlin. I would have put Eamon McCann, and I suppose a few other names as well.
It would be very difficult to define or to categorise Bernadette's role during the Battle of the Bogside. She was on the spot. I mean, the main thing about Bernadette is that she was out there sort of with people, young people on the streets. And she was a very inspirational figure. She was a terrific speaker, of course, and all that, and spoke in a way which lots of people could understand readily. And one of her great qualities is that, I mean, that she's a bit mad, Bernadette, I mean. She was telling people that CS gas is all right once you get used to it. And she would walk through it, and she was able at times. She was to walk through these clouds of CS gas, which... She was a real cool lady, Bernadette, in 1969.
There was an impression that I was everywhere because, I suppose I was noticeable because I was me and I shouldn't maybe have been at it and I was a member of Parliament or whatever. But looking back on it, my memory was I never slept for 3 days and 3 nights. I was on an adrenaline high, I suppose. I was quite determined the police weren't coming in. The whole thing was as easily stopped as withdrawing the police. You couldn't withdraw the Bogside. It was a fixed entity. The people lived there. Any kind of wise head in the police would in fact have pulled the police back.
Well, the shields that we had were hopeless. They were quite small, and there was no such thing as body armour. We kept being hit in the ankles and legs by stones ricocheting off the ground and so on. And a lot of the men got cardboard that you would use in packing goods and that, and tie them round our legs like shin guards, and football shin guards, which saved us a bit.
We'd be throwing stones at the police, they would use their shields. And Bernadette stands, was up around the credit union, about 1 in the morning, and Bernadette appears with her bullhorn and says to the police, "I wish to address the rioters." They said, "Certainly." They think she's going to call for some kind of truth. And Bernadette stands in the middle ground and she turns her back to the police and she says to the rioters, "I have noticed that you all throw your stones at the heads of the police, and the police raise their shields, and you're not hitting them at all. Therefore I suggest you break into 2 groups. Half of you throw stones at their feet, at their legs, the other half simultaneously throw stones at their head. That way we'll get this over with quickly." And with that I hear a roar, an elemental roar, and as the police, who realise Bernadette's putting one over them, they come charging down the street, and there's just me and Bernadette. And how I did it, I don't know. There was a 6-foot wall leading into somebody's backyard. I climbed that wall, over the wall, into the backyard, took the lid off a bin, climbed in, pulled the lid over myself, and sat there for a couple of hours. I'm a hero. I don't know what ever happened, Bernadette.
Number 1, dirty jeep, barricades out, barricades are beautiful. The next request is for Mrs. Nora McDurdy, 44 Beaning Gardens, from her wee loving and handsome husband, Joe 90.
I was more or less at the front line with the rest, rioting. And I remember that the ammunition, for want of a better word, in terms of stones and bottles and petrol bombs were being ferried up to us, and we were always very conscious that there were people back at what is now known as Free Dairy Corner who were elderly, and at that stage our flats were people in their 50s and their 60s, but also people in their 70s and their 80s who were as much part of the operation as we were, people filling petrol bombs, people gathering stones and ammunition to be brought up to the front.
Maybe some people were scared, but on the whole, generally, I think people helped, especially there with tear gas and what have you. When that was thrown, people used to leave buckets of water outside the front door and all, and pieces of cloth for young lads, they clear their eyes, and not only young lads, but older people too. Let's remember that in the Battle of the Bogside, that there was older people as well as the young people were in the front line, and top of Roswell's flats and all the rest of it, but the older people were a backup, really.
It was a real community in action. Strange as it might seem, it was like one of those lads' battalion in the First World War, where everybody was, from the same streets or the same factories or something. Everybody knew one another.
The effect of the gas and the fear of violence on the streets saw many young children and elderly people evacuated from the area, some crossing the border to the Irish Republic and others to friends and family in different parts of the city.
The tear gas, which now pervades the whole of the Bogside area, is a good enough reason for leaving home. But these people now consider themselves to be full-blown refugees from a merciless enemy, and nothing will convince them that the Protestants, the police and the B Specials aren't to be kept out of the Bogside area at all costs.
Why is it impossible for you to stay?
With the police and the B men and the Paisleys, you'd have to get out. Are you born you out?
All I remember is us being moved out of our home in Herd Street, the barricade being there. I remember my mother taking furniture and saying to my father, take this, take that, because we might not be able to come back again. We were taken into houses in Craigan and Chantal. We ended up in a house on Foy Road. And all the talk was that the house might be burnt down. And that's all we were hearing. We weren't hearing anything else. It wasn't safe. We weren't safe in our own home, our environment. And it was pretty traumatic for us as a family to be moved like that.
I remember I never had a bag packed with all the necessities for him, with a new baby and for my other children ready to go, because so had all my neighbours, because we felt that, that we were going to be overwhelmed by the sheer force of the police and the B Specials.
As fighting raged throughout the day, a press conference was held at which Paddy Doherty called for every able-bodied man in Ireland to travel to Derry to assist in the defence of the Bogside. That evening,